Hello again, folks. This is the concluding episode of Resistance and Spies Week, and we're back to the French Resistance after Matthew Cobb's pretty cool talk last night. I was just talking to Roman, our guest, a second ago. Tackling the Resistance in just an hour is complicated, but I think we covered some of the basics yesterday, and now we're going to go to the detail of what happened in Normandy. Although, again, you could spend hours talking about it. It's a huge subject. But my guest tonight is a local guy, just a few hundred yards across the town, basically. Roman Breget is a tour guide here in Normandy. Good evening, Roman. How are you today?
Good evening. I'm ready for this show.
And I did kind of bully to Roman to do this. We did a walk on Omaha Beach a couple of weeks ago. I said, you should really come on and do a show. I don't get enough French people on the show. So well done for stepping up to the plate and coming and talking about it. It's important that French people talk about French history, I think.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Plus, it's a very local thing here. A lot of material is in French. It's a lot of stories that if you don't know French, you probably never heard about.
And would you agree with when we at the end of the show with Matthew yesterday that I think within France now people kind of know the big story. They know the de Gaulle, Jean Moulin right at the top, and they kind of know their local stories. But all that middle bit, that the organizations, the networks, that's where I think a lot of people don't really have much knowledge. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, completely. Everyone will know I will know from where I'm coming who was executed, at least the name of who was executed in Chateaubriand, next to where I was living. We all know here in Normandy some of the local guys. We're talking about Jacques Vicaud and Guillaume Mercader. But then kind of in between how all of this kind of worked together and how they were working in relationship with all of the big names that everyone in France know. And we got no idea because it's so complicated. It's a lot of part of it is boring. It's politics. It's a
lot of meetings.
Meetings. And it's not, people want to know the juicy parts, sabotage. Yeah. And but that's one aspect of the French Resistance as well.
Yeah. So we've got a PowerPoint that you kindly prepared for us. And for those who saw yesterday's show, or if you didn't see yesterday's show, of course, following the events of the spring of 1940, France is divided into the two zones. And we're talking tonight about Normandy. So Normandy, of course, I don't think I need to point it out to people. It's up here in the occupied zone. And we're going to be talking about what happened there. So I'll kind of hand over to you to start talking, and then when I have questions or I have comments coming in, I will jump in my inimitable style. So over to you, Roman.
So I think what is important to realize is also the situation of Normandy very early on in 1940, just after the French defeat in June 1940. We are part of the occupied zone. And you get a big difference in the resistance if you're starting to resist in the zone occupied by the German or the one which is still free of German. And Normandy is obviously in the occupied zone where you got plenty of German everywhere. But it's even going to be more occupied very early on compared to a lot of other regions in France. And that's what I wanted to show. We got two maps coming for the next slide, where you see the situation in Normandy. On the left, you see the divisions, the German divisions being set up to occupy the country, Brittany, the Loire Valley, Paris, and Normandy. So they're written in black, but you also have names in blue, numbers in blue. These numbers in blue are the divisions that were sent by the German on the coast of France, Normandy and northern France, to prepare a potential invasion of Great Britain. So not only you got the troops who are going to occupy you, like they're occupying all of the rest of the northern part of France, but you are going to host even more German, because these guys might be used in an invasion for Great Britain.
And so essentially a policing force and a defensive force in Normandy.
Well, the Germans were seeing this as an offensive force because I guess they could still thinking with Operation Sea Lion,
Yeah.
etc. But yeah, you got double the numbers of German compared to a lot of other region. And same thing, because you're so close from the Great Britain, from England, you have all of the airfield. And you have the airfield, but you have all of the squadron, you have all of the logistic. It's taking over local fields and local resources. So very early, the German presence in 1940 is already stronger in Normandy than it would be in other part of the country. And it's absolutely awful, because the Germans are going to just order the population what to do. They need to live here. So they're using city halls, they're using schools, they're using every building they need, and they're asking the municipalities to pay for everything. So if they want electricity, they want running water, if they want anything, they're going to build it, and the municipality will have to pay for it. And it's leading to ideas, to moments in Lisieux. The municipality complained because they had to pay for 50,000 francs of lingerie that the German wanted to be reimbursed for them. In Bayeux, they had to build things. In Comont-les-Ventés, they had to build showers and running water. It's commodities you don't even have in the countryside of Normandy. And on top of this, it doesn't go very well. We often say that the Germans were, sometimes they were mostly polite, and they were not trying to bother the population. When you go in detail, very early on in Normandy, you had tension between the local people and between the German. You had, I was reading just a list of in October 1940 of events that took place around Bayeux. Just in October 1940, a few months after the victory of the German in France, you had a fight between gendarmes, policemen, and German soldiers in Bayeux. You had a girl that was wounded with a bullet by a German soldier, probably by accident, but still it was in Isigny-sur-Mer. You had two mayors and one other guy in Trévière being arrested because they opposed the German for one reason or another. You had an attempt of rape in Tracy-sur-Mer. You had another woman that was beaten in Bayeux by the German. In Honfleur, a guy was arrested because he protested when a German started to flirt with his friend, with his girlfriend. So all of this, it's going to be a perfect ground for a spirit of resistance very early on by the local people.
And that's important because, when I did the show with Sophie Poldermans this afternoon, the Netherlands, the resistance didn't really pick up till as late as 1943. So it absolutely depends where you are in Europe as to what's going on between the Germans in your area and the local population, how tense it is, how much imposition they're putting on you. And in this case, in Normandy, how much they're just taking in terms of money and resources. And so it's fair to say what you're saying is that Normandy actually was an area where the resistance started pretty early because of the difficulties they're facing.
Oh, well, it started. I mean, you couldn't really start earlier. But before even talking about the organized resistance, there's another aspect of the resistance I wanted to talk about. It's, the civilian resistance, the not armed, not organized resistance. And this is starting very early in Bayeux or all around the area. In fall 1940, there's a report by the French police in Bayeux saying that the population desperately want the German to leave. And things are not going to get any better. This is October 1940, and the local people are already exhausted. So you start to see a lot of little acts of resistance. In February 1941, they were saying in Bayeux, in one single day, the German placarded 33 posters for whatever reason about, advertising people, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. In the hour, 20 of them were destroyed. And this is little things that the German absolutely don't like. You have the first in summer 1941. You got what your host Matthew, he was talking about it yesterday, the Battle of the V's. The BBC will tell people, well, you can paint V's for victory to show the support for the Allied forces. The German will try to counterattack and say, well, we'll keep the V and we'll put a swastika on it, so it will be victory for Germany. So at the moment where the local people started to paint the V's and the Lorraine cross for the symbol of the resistance, the one you have on the picture here, well, not from 1940, but there are real World War II graffitis in southern France that were done in 1944. In Caen, they found caricatures of Hitler and little paper left on the ground, resist with the cross of Lorraine. Everywhere you have these V's, these Vive de Gaulle, Vive la France, Vive la RAF, Vive the Royal Air Force. Because you still have, you believe that the English are still going to liberate you. So there is this entire spirit, and I could do just an hour about every single things local people will do to bother the German. And
this is important, just sorry to jump in, because I posted on a Facebook group this afternoon about last night's show and today's show, and someone said, oh, the French didn't start doing anything resistance until it looked like the Allies were going to win the war. And you go, no, that's not the case, because in 1940, even 41, 42, the Germans are still absolutely winning the war. They're winning it in Europe, they're winning it in North Africa. This is not, I can understand people getting braver by 44 because the tide of war is changing. But in 40, it's a pretty bleak time. So being defiant, if you're French in that era, is in many ways braver than being defiant 4 years later when things are starting to go your way. So I wanted to kind of make sure people realize that these acts of resistance are very early in Normandy.
In all of these little things that may sound like nothing, the Germans complain about it. We have reports from the police in Bayeux or from the German in Saint-Lô that are saying how they don't like this type of behavior, and they're actively complaining and asking for those who are doing all of this are being found and arrested, not yet deported, not yet really executed, will be used for the biggest act like sabotage and things like this, but it's already really bothering the German, and it will just go increasingly, the local population will just be increasingly defiant against the German. The big turn in France is 1942, 1943, especially 1942, because you got at the same time Laval, who is the collaborator. He will become the prime minister. He's coming back at the government, and people hate him. And that's the moment where the Vichy government will start to go deeper in the collaboration. At the same moment, the Germans are starting to lose in North Africa and Stalingrad. The Germans can be beaten. They're not invisible. Maybe this war will end differently than we think. So people are showing more and more willingness to kind of resist or bother the German. And in Normandy, at the very same time, you got the beginning of the construction of the Atlantic Wall. So it's even putting more pressure on the local people. So it just shows you that there is a big difference. We often say that you got like 400,000 people in France that actively resisted and 400,000 people who actively collaborated, and the middle part was just trying to survive. But in reality, the middle part wants the victory of the Allies overwhelmingly. They're not actively resisting, but they're doing all of these little things to show the German they're not welcome. They're going to we know it in Bayeux pretty well, Saint-Martin-des-Entrées, William Ferguson. You just go to the grave of an Allied pilot that was shut down, and you put flowers, and you could be killed and deported for this. I mean, so many things. And sometimes just saying silent Again, because you have Jewish children being hidden in farms, you get people making fake IDs, you get soldiers, airmen that are kept in farms and communities for weeks sometimes. People who are not involved in the resistance heard about it, and yet they said nothing. And I think it was Léonard Gilles, we will talk about him soon, an active resistant in Normandy. He was joining one of the airmen, I don't remember if he was American or British, in the train station from Caen to Paris. In front of him during the entire train ride, there was someone else, another French. They did not exchange a single word. He was keeping close eye to the ally airmen he was trying to rescue, to make sure he won't talk and he won't betray his cover. And when the train arrived in Paris and they're getting out of the train, that guy told him, looking at Léonard Gilles, he told him, well, thank you, you're a brave man. That guy understood from the beginning what was going on and decided, well, just say thank you, I know what you're doing, I won't say anything, but in a way, keep on going. And it's something that is very different. The resistance could rely on a large part of the French population to at least not denounce them or betray them, while the collaborators could not rely on the local population, really.
And that's ultimately the point Matthew Cobb made last night, is that de Gaulle's famous June the 18th call for resistance isn't specifically talking about running around with rifles. It's talking about resisting it in principle, isn't it? It's talking about the act of being defiant against the occupiers, and then it morphs into, and then when we hear the word resistance, we think of, as Matthew said, the men running around with berets and Sten guns, and that is a part of it. But there's a guy who used to work for me, Gregory Hayes from Caen, whose grandmother had to provide cider for the Germans in Caen. And barrels of cider, and every single barrel she gave the Germans, she squatted over the barrel and pissed in it first, so that they had a bit of a piss in every, and that was her act of resistance. That was her act of defiance. Now, I don't think any German soldiers were killed by that. I don't think it caused any big health issues to the Germans in Caen, but it was an act of defiance. It's an act of feeling that you're getting one back over these occupiers. It's about a spirit, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's something, but I won't talk about it really anymore because it's not really the entire point of the show. But you got this. It's important, in my opinion, to keep this in mind. And the population in Normandy, for its proximity with Great Britain, for the overburdening cost of the occupation, is really in its large majority strongly anti-German. And very early on in Normandy, we'll have the first group, the first real act of organized resistance. And Maurice Marlin is one of the first. And he cannot be more first than the moment when the Germans are arriving inside your town and starting to occupy you. You have a letter here of one guy, Magritte. He's British. He's working for the Suez Canal Company at the British Embassy in Paris. Paris is going to be occupied by the Germans. The Germans are arriving. They're evacuating everyone, all the staff, to Granville, where in Granville he's finding tons of other British soldiers who are trying to escape from all of these nightmares. And Maurice Marlin, a professor, will start to organize their passage from Granville to Jersey, which is not yet occupied by the German. And he will start like this, starting to talk with the local fishermen, local people, to host these allies, these British soldiers, to help their passage. And he is creating one of the first network of resistance in Normandy, which will be called simply the Groupe Marlin. Now, sadly, he will be executed by the German in summer 1944 after DDay, before Granville is liberated. But yeah, that's one very active group of resistance in Granville. In Calvados and La Manche in Lower Normandy, you start to see as well in 1940 two groups, well, several, but two main groups of resistance. One is led by Robert Guédon. Robert Guédon is a French soldier who ended up in Granville. Same thing. He ended up in Granville, where he got in touch with British who were trying to get out of the country to go back to Great Britain. And all of this British army and British embassy and British services that are getting out of France, they know they need to keep ties with local people because they want to know what will be going on during this, well, what's coming next after the French defeat. So they're starting to be in touch with Robert Guédon, telling him, well, if you can organize something, if you can start to give us information about what's going on. So Robert Guédon will start to organize, especially with Catholic students, a first network to tell the British, to tell them what they see, what's going on, the troops the Germans are that they're bringing. Especially the British are still very concerned about a potential invasion by the Germans. So it's really helping them to get an idea of what's going on. So it's one of the first network of resistance. On the other side, you got the Armée des Volontaires, same thing, kind of more or less with contact with the British, with British troops and British intelligence service. But you see some of the first men who we're going to see them regularly for the next moment, talking about the resistance in Normandy. René Duché, Léonard Gilles, Robert Thomas, these guys are part of the army of the volunteer, Armée des Volontaires, who is not really well organized. They don't know really what they're doing. They're talking a lot about politics, about what should come after the war, etc. But they don't get really anything done properly. These two groups will end up very differently. The group Robert Guédon will start to work for larger organization in France to get in touch with Freinet. We talk about Freinet in Matthew talk about Freinet, and he will try to associate his group to a larger movement. He will succeed, but at the end of 1941, one of their members, student, will be arrested. She will be questioned, and maybe we don't know torture, but she'll start to give some names. And in just a matter of days, there is tens of arrests. Robert Guédon is forced to flee North Africa. Jacques Vico is just abandoning for a short moment, starting to be quiet. And that's the end of Groupe Robert in Normandy. For the Army of the Volontaires, it will be a little bit different. You get over network, but I just gave the name Réseau Saint-Jacques, who will be in the Cotentin, in Sainte-Mère-Église, the first resistance, Sainte-Mère-Église, but they will be dismantled in 1941 as well. And the one that I want to talk about as well is Interalliés. Now, this is a Franco-Polish intelligence network, also of evasion for the Allies airmen. In Normandy, they were working in Lyon-sur-Mer, close to Caen, in Lisieux, in Cherbourg, but Hugo Bleicher, we're going to talk about him later. Hugo Bleicher, who is a German working for the intelligence, the counterintelligence service for the German, arrested some of the members, turned them against the resistance, against the Allies, to destroy the network from the inside. And in fall 1941, the Interalliés network is absolutely destroyed by arrest from the German. But Hugo Bleicher will be very clever. He will keep safe a group of this network in Lisieux, because his agent, the resistant he turned against the resistance, are still working in this network. So he wants to keep like this network, a kind of puppet, to see what they're doing and to gain more than just arresting them and sending them in camp or in prison. So in 1940, 1941, the beginning of the resistance, organized resistance, but not extremely effective yet. I just, for those of you that could be interested, this is just a diagram just trying to reorganize everything about all of this movement of resistance, the network, and the FFI, who is where I'm not going to spend too much time, but just it could be useful when we're talking about the big movement, OCM, Organisation Civile et Militaire, Libération Nord. These are the kind of the backbones, the movement of resistance, who are then working with multiple network, who will take care of one single job, like intelligence, evasion, fake papers, etc. So you have networks working for this movement of resistance. You have network working for Free France. You got networks working with the intelligence service of the British, with the SOE. So it's just a diagram to try to make sense in this.
I just want to jump in quickly because when we talk about the complication of the French resistance networks, it's fair to say that in that 41 period, the British, the Allies, we're still sorting ourselves out. We're still, because at the beginning of the war, MI5, MI6, MI9, SOE, they've all kind of got a play in it, intelligence services. It takes some time for everybody to start saying, okay, which bit is going to do which bit of this job there, and the roles start becoming defined, and the SOE starts getting more and more control, and then the SOE by now has its agents in France, and they start making contact. So if people want to criticize the French for taking some time to get organized, it took the British some time to get organized as well. It's a difficult process. And when you talked about the German counterintelligence units, the Germans have had a long time to get their counterintelligence working because of the way the whole Nazis came to power, and that they've had the Gestapo and things like that, and yet for a long time. So they had a bit of a head start on being devious, because us Brits and French, we hadn't had much training in being so devious and underground. The Germans have been quite good at it. So yeah, important to understand that 41 period is a kind of a training ground for everybody. Everybody's learning how to do it, and as they're learning how to do it, they're getting some things wrong, but eventually they're getting it right.
Yeah, and this is, you see it totally also in what's going to happen in Normandy, especially. So when we're starting, especially end of 1941 and 1942, that's where things are starting to be more and more organized, not just at a national level, but also at a local level. And this is what we can see in the next slide. So Maurice Girard, who was from the Armée des Volontaires, was a bit frustrated because, again, they were mostly talking, doing a bit of propaganda, but not being very active. What are you doing? You're all together, you agree, okay, we will resist, but what are we doing? So he went to Paris to meet with members of the OCM, Organisation Civile et Militaire, which is a large movement of resistance. And these guys told him, okay, it's what you say is great, you got some kind of a group around you, you are in charge of creating a network, a group for the OCM in Normandy. So he's coming back and he's organizing everything. And you see here some of the names of the people that we're going to talk about for the OCM. The OCM, the Organisation Civile et Militaire, had two large networks mainly. One is about gathering intelligence. They will end up working also for the British and sending things to the British and the French intelligence service. Everything is organized for the intelligence by René Duché and his wife, Odette Duché. René Duché is famous. It's one of the most famous stories, but maybe we don't know exactly where the legend started or not. He's the guy who was a painter, inside painter. I mean, he's renovating the inside of building, and he was asked, well, he actually applied for working in Camp Commendantur, where he was received by, that's the whole story of being received by an official in the commandant tour. He sees a pile of paper with a name like Atlantic Wall. The German officer is being called for something, so he's quickly taking the map and realizing that he won't get out with the map. He's hiding the map of the Atlantic Wall defenses behind a mirror. Then the Germans coming back, okay, we agree, that color, it's look good, it will be perfect, thank you very much. And then he's leaving the commandant tour, asking for the guard, well, check me to make sure I have nothing, just so I'm very clean. And then there's an old fuss because the German realized something was stolen, they don't know what happened. And when he's coming back to do his work, the room had been completely emptied except for the mirror. And he's just moving the mirror, and he's finding the map, and he's sending the map then to the Great Britain. Now, it's a story that seems to be true because a few of the resistance talked about it, but we don't know where the map is, and we don't have any account really from the British having like, wow, we received an amazing map with all of the defenses in Normandy. So it's where it's, but he's that guy. He's the guy who became famous for that particular story. Locally in Bayeux, we know a lot about Guillaume Mercader. He's a sector leader for the OCM in Bayeux. He is well, he won a few prizes in cycling. I don't remember exactly, but he is having a bicycle shop in Bayeux, and he will use an excuse of him training, because he was a professional cyclist, to get everywhere around the coast and start gathering intelligence. And he's supposed to be one of the guys who noticed that the guns in Ponyhock were moved. Now, again, this is very unclear, but he clearly did a lot of work around Bayeux and what's going to be Omaha Beach sector. Now, these guys are gathering information, and then they're ending all of the information, all of the little piece I've seen, a trench here, I've seen a gun here, a machine gun nest, etc., to Robert Thomas, who will be in charge of putting everything on a military map. And I'll show you, there's a slide where you will see some of his work a little bit later. But it's stunning, it's beautiful what he was able to achieve. On the other side, the OCM also have another network, which is evasion. It's called Marie-Odile. This will be overlooked by Léonard Gilles, who's a lawyer, and his secretary, Louise Boitard, or her alias being Janine Boitard, and she is widely famous because she was portrayed by Irina Demick in the movie The Longest Day. Well, the two will end up marrying each other. They ended up in couple, but they were the backbone of this evasion network in Normandy. And one of the women who's going to help them is Léa Villon, who was in charge of the maternity hospital at Bénouville, the Chateau de Bénouville. For those who've been to Pegasus Bridge and heard the story of Pegasus Bridge, you see very well the Chateau of Bénouville. She was in charge, and she helped the resistance a lot, especially in hiding people. So this is for the OCM, but this is not the only one. And the second most powerful part of the resistance are the communists in Normandy. Now, in some regions, the communists were the most organized and the most numerous resistance. In Normandy, it's in other part of France there were, but in Normandy, they were second. The OCM was really the largest one. You got the clandestine direction of the Communist Party in 1941, Marius Cyr, Joseph Etienne, Émile Julien. We're going to talk about them because they did some incredible and deadly things to the Germans. They were helped by Edmond Robert, who was organizing everything around between Honfleur and Lisieux. She's called by some today the soul of the communist resistance in that part of Normandy, Le Pays d'Auge, a liaison officer, gathering weapons, hiding people, helping to understand how to build explosives. I mean, she will be involved in so many things. In totally different area, you have Michel de Boire, a historian, an archaeologist, who will be in charge of the propaganda newspaper of the communist in Calvados, called Calvados Lib. Well, he's a deeply Catholic person who would never go in a communist party, but in I think it was in 1941, every teacher was asked to do in May a class about Jeanne d'Arc by the Vichy government. You can understand the appeal. I mean, Jeanne d'Arc, she found the English, so we should do the same. But Michel de Bois did something a bit different. He praised Jeanne d'Arc for her resistance spirit against an invader. And that's the moment where some of his students went to see him, and one of them was explaining, well, I just went to see him and told him, well, so if I understand you well, you're not really for the VD. And Michel said, no, not at all. And his student, communist militant, will start to tell him, well, we are a little group. If you want to join us, and he will agree. He will agree. On the other side, you have Henri Neveu. He's the leader of the Front National in Caen railway station. And you can imagine how strategic will be a railway station, especially in Caen, in Normandy, in the center of what is going to be the DDay beaches. So he will organize some kind of resistance inside the Caen railway station. Henri Neveu, the communist worker, and Michel de Bois, the kind of deeply Catholic historian, are going to end up being arrested by the German at the same moment and share the same cell where they're going to talk. One is going to talk about his communist ideology, the other one will talk about religion and saint, and they kind of became friends, even if they were absolutely not having the same ideology. But Michel de Bois was in part of this communist resistance movement, who is going to be very active. If we move forward, we have a few other network. Here we call it the network PTT. What we call the PTT in France, they are post and telecommunication. You need guys for the post office to take care of the line of telecommunication, the airline or the buried line of communication, all of the material, etc. But it's important to keep an eye on all of this. And in Caen, one of the first to organize the resistance in this telecommunication will be Henri Leveillé. He's going to start his own network of resistance in Caen, will be in touch with another guy in Saint-Lô, but you have here Michel Richet, who is going to organize his network around Saint-Lô as well. Etienne Bobo, we're going to talk about him. He destroyed some German communication between Utah Beach and Sainte-Marie-du-Mont on the night of D-Day. So these guys...
Sorry, just to jump in quickly here,
yes.
Roman. The PTT, I think, are the unsung heroes because of the ability to be able to move around. If your job is going up and down telegraph poles, going and knocking on doors as postal workers, telephone workers, telephone engineers, it's a great cover for moving around, isn't it? Because it's your job. You've got wire cutters, you've got things, so I think I wanted to make that point. The second point I wanted to make, because you've made the reference nicely to Pegasus Bridge and the maternity hospital. I want to make the point to the viewers that all this information being gathered, none of these people at all know that Normandy is where the invasion is going to come. At this point, they are doing it simply because it is the area they happen to live in. I don't want people to think that they are doing this because they know something's happening later on. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. But there's no one's got the foresight at this point of knowing that Normandy is where it's going to be. I mean, very, very few people, even in the spring of 44, would have known it was going to be Normandy.
Completely. And as you say, for these guys of the communication, they know where the lines are. They know which one is linked to what German headquarters. They're hiding every material when the Germans are coming. Say, well, we need this and this to create but we just send it to another city because we needed it. I mean, it's really crucial, the work they are doing, and we don't talk too much about them because they were not part of a large movement It's just a network kind of by itself, working for all of the other ones, but not being, working just for itself. Alliance. Now, this is another network for intelligence controlled by the Free French government, by de Gaulle in London government, if I can say. So you might think, well, all of these people gathering intelligence, why don't they work together? But it's safer. And for the British and the Allies, they want to get confirmation. I mean, you don't trust one single source of information. So if several group of intelligence are telling you this is what's going on, and you can confirm it with air picture, then yeah, it's real, and you're facing this on D-Day. But yeah, you need all of this diversity, and all of them have different access and abilities. For Alliance in Normandy, because Alliance is a national network. In Normandy, the leader is Robert Douin. He's a kind of an artist. He's a sculptor. He's renovating church, if I remember well, around Normandy. So perfect cover to get in steeple, start to work in measuring things and working, and then overlooking the countryside and taking notes. While he's working, and that's how everything is working. You start with 1 or 2 guys who's going to hire another one, who's going to hire another one. So Robert Douin contacted Georges Tomine, who was a fisherman in Port-en-Bessin, to gather more intelligence. Georges Tomine, now in return, is going to hire Désiré Lemierre, who was the farmer in Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer and was going to become Omaha Beach. But being a farmer next to Omaha Beach, that he had nothing else to do. The German took over everything. So he became a mail delivery guy. He was working for the PTT, but not in the PTT network. And he started also gathering intelligence in Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, Colville, and Vierville-sur-Mer, all around what's going to be Omaha Beach. So that's how these guys were working. So I don't remember if I got another one. Yeah, Buckmaster. So this is in further inland. They are built on the ashes of the Interalliés, the Franco-Polish network that was wiped out by Hugo Bleicher. It's going to be rebuilt with the help of the SOE. And that's why this network will be called Jean-Marie/Buckmaster. I'm not really perfect with the SOE and everything, but they're part of the SOE. And Paul and André Hautechot, a couple, is going to be at the center of everything. And you get the diagram of the organization. It shows you how complex and insanely kind of interrelated, but at the same time close all of these relationships are. So Dr. Hautechot, the leader, he knows only a handful of people. So that if he's arrested, well, he cannot give the list of everyone. He only knows a handful of people. These people will know a few other handful of people, etc., etc. So he got group in Lisieux, in Deauville, in Trouville, in Orbec, in Honfleur, etc. Now we're going to come back to this one because they will meet a very bitter end. Now, what is the resistance going to achieve in Normandy? Because we talked about how they were organized, but what are they really going to do? One of the most impressive thing will be sabotage. In the south of Caen, on April 16, 1942, there is a train going full speed with the Goon filled with German soldiers going back from Leeds, and a rail was moved by the French resistance, communist resistance. That's the result. You look at the picture, the train is just, it's a wreck. Close to 30 German killed and about 20 other one wounded. The Germans are absolutely furious about what's happened. And below is what they're told, that what they put in placard in Caen. And tell me if it's ring a bell, everything the German is going to force the population to do. All of the circulation of vehicles and people is forbidden between 7:30 a.m. p.m. and 6 a.m. All restaurants must be closed after 6 p.m. All amusement facilities like theater, cinema, things will be closed. Reunion of any type, even for sport, will be forbidden. I mean, it sounds like
sounds very familiar, Roman. Yeah,
very familiar. Hopefully, as people were saying, when we were trying to breach the curfew last year, we were only exposed to a fine. The second part of the placard is not that funny, even today, and will never be funny. It's ordered that 30 communists and Jews will be arrested and executed. And if we do not find those who killed these German soldiers with this train sabotage, 1,000 communist Jews or criminals will be deported or executed. It's very hard, and the Germans are absolutely furious. They're asking complete cooperation from the French authorities to find these guys. And not only they're not going to find them, but 15 days later, on the exact same railway, on the exact same place, you got a second sabotage. Another 20 German killed and another 30 German wounded. I mean, this is going to, the Germans are going to be freely in reprisal, arresting tens of people, deporting tens of people. It's this type of resistance.
But doing it in the same place is a big psychological, that's a big slap in the face, the Germans saying, don't you start imposing your rules on us. You know, we're going to get you again in exactly the same place. It's a symbolic gesture. It's much more than just the incident. It's making a massive statement.
Yeah, exactly. But this type of sabotage, any action that might kill German soldiers, is not really something that local people and even a lot of French resistance like to do, because it's going to affect a lot and dramatically many other people, including prisoners, including colleagues that were taken hostages by the German and are in prison. Some of the resistance were telling those who did that, we will talk about them, well, you are killing our friends by doing this. So this is where, for this very impressive action, you're not going to have a lot of them because it's very costly on the population. And the Germans are going to execute 40 people and deport 120 for what happened in Iran at this sabotage. And these 120, they don't know it yet, but they are going to be some of the first political prisoners being sent in Auschwitz. So they're not coming back. Now, who did this? These were the communists, the FTP, Front Tireurs et Partisans, the Communist Party that started against the Vichy government and the German, but especially after the invasion of Soviet Union, will be some of the most violent against the German. You have the face of some of the men and women who were involved. Marius Cyr, Joseph Etienne, they were both involved. They had train workers joining them. One of them, this train worker knew exactly where to do the sabotage. The place where it took place, it's just a straight line for the train. It's going to be at full speed. So, of course, that's where it's going to be the most damaged. Edmond Robert is keeping a little notebook where she is writing everything they're trying for explosives. Which type of explosive? How's it working? You shouldn't zoom too much inside because she's giving some recipe about how doing your own bomb for sabotage.
Yeah, we don't want to be accused of inciting violence. Yeah,
it's fine. It's online on the Calvados archives, so it's fine. But these guys, they're not going to stop here. They're going to hire more people to support them. They're going to destroy the hay stocks from the German. This is one of the most simple things to do. We never talk about it for the resistance, but you're just walking, you know, you got tons and tons of hay being stuck in one place or in a train. I mean, just one match, one little thing, and you just they'll do it in Caen or around Caen. They're going to destroy. The one-time thing was 800 tons of hay that the German wanted to keep for them. They're going to do a lot of little acts of sabotage, but the problem is by involving a few more people, well, the inevitable will happen. One of them will be caught. He will give some piece of information about the other one. So another one will be caught, giving more information, and the Germans are just following that line, and they're starting to arrest almost everyone of this network of this first group of very active communist resistance. Gisèle Guillemot is going to be deported. Marius Cyr is going to be executed. Joseph Etienne is going to be arrested, but he will escape and go into hiding. Edmond Robert, she is a teacher. Inside her village, or I forgot the name, it's next to Héran, next to from where the sabotage happened. She was in her classroom, and so policemen, I don't remember if it were policemen or Germans coming. She immediately realized what happened, and she had her notebook with exactly how to do the explosives and things like this. She had it with her. She took the notebook, put it in a bag of a girl, one of her students. She was arrested, tortured, questioned. She never admitted she was part of this action. She never said anything. The problem is, one day, a few days later, at the local police station, the mayor of the community came and showed the policeman, look at a father of a school girl. He gave me that notebook. This is a proof that she was involved, that she was part of the resistance. The gendarme, the policeman, is, this thing can have real consequences. Maybe you should keep it hidden. Maybe we should not talk about it. No, we need to do something. So clearly seeing that the policeman was not going to do anything because he don't want to bring the proof of what she did to the court, the mayor is going to bring that notebook to the court, to the judge, and she's going to be deported. Now, she will survive more than 2 years, 3 years of camp, not in Auschwitz, but in another camp, but she will die as she is coming back to France, being exhausted by everything she lived. So that's one very impressive and very famous locally action of resistance here in Calvados. But this is not the only one. Gathering intelligence is something else. So we talked about how, thanks to being, you're fishermen, you are working in churches, you are a part of the post office, and you're gathering all of these pieces, but they all need to be assembled in maps. And these are 2 maps, only 2 of many of them, that were done by Robert Thomas. So he was in charge of just putting everything on military map and combining everything into something comprehensive that can be sent then to the Allies. I haven't put the detail of where it is, but maybe some of our DDay fan in the audience can recognize a few places. This is Ouistreham. This is the casino. You got the he don't show really the bunkers on the beach, but all the network of roadblocks, barbed wire, mines, the DCA, the anti-aircraft tower that we still have in Ouistreham, but still exists in Ouistreham. The other one is from the Douvres radar station. I just put 2 of these maps here, but there was a book that was released just, I think it was 2 years ago, Robert Thomas, Résistant and Cartographe. It's in French, but the pictures inside are amazing. It's not only just the map, they have a lot of maps, but also all of the archives that were found from this very, very active resistance.
And it's a good point to make, Roman, because when we look at the bigger maps for D-Day and the Battle of Normandy, we know a lot of that information came from aerial photos, but not exclusively from aerial photos. As you said, multiple sources to get the same information, because aerial photos only give a 2-dimensional view of things. It's always better to get a confirmation from people on the ground who can say, yeah, And so when we've on our other shows on World War II TV, we've used those bigot maps. It's really important to spare a thought about where that information came from and the networks that supplied some of that to, as I say, back up what they got from the aerial photos and from the photos of the coast of France they got from British. All those resources that came together. Yeah, amazing stuff.
So if we try to, again, summarize all of the different jobs the resistance did, so you get sabotage, intelligence, I don't remember the next slide, escape network. We always think about the escape network. There's, I don't know too much, there's a lot of things that were talked about crossing the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
If you were an airman shut down in Normandy, you get three choices. Brittany, which is close, and you do not need to cross a border. If you can get a boat or something to bring you to Cornwall, which is quite close, I mean, you could do it. So this is a possibility that was offered to some of the airmen. You then, if you could move to Paris, you could be sent even to Switzerland, which is a neutral country, or then to Spain, and then Gibraltar, and then being shipped back to Great Britain. And this is what Léonard Gilles and Janine, that's what they're going to do, Janine Boitard. You get this report, you get the maternity hospital of Benneville here. You get a report that was written by, I think it was Porter and two airmen that were shut down, Porter and Clabe Fleisch. And they're mentioning Robert Thomas, a Frenchman by the name of Robert Thomas, came to see us, and he provided identity papers, etc. They're talking about Léonard Gilles, which we talked about. So, I mean, it's very, when you look at the testimonies of these guys, the French resistance can sound like something, yeah, was it really useful in a military point of view? Was it really worth it? But for these guys, for these airmen, the help brought by these people is life-saving. Completely. You got another story that I found, and you get so many people being involved in this one, and shows you all the multiple layer. Hubert E. Trent from the 350 Bomb Squadron. He was shut down in Cahagnes, south of Caen. And as he's explaining, he was first kind of taken care of by Raymond Pierre. Now, Raymond Pierre was so communist that he joined the Republican in Spain to fight with the Republican in Spain during the Civil War. So he's in south of Caen. He will contact Léonard Gilles, who will also come to take care of him and send him to the abbot or the priest Sébir, who's living in Condé-sur-Noireau. And they're going to stay here for some time, and then he's going to be taken care of by a woman. I think he's describing her as a blonde woman, about 30 years old, Capitaine Gilles' secretary. This is Louise or Janine Boitard, who is doing the last part of the job, at least for Normandy, which is taking them to take their train to then get to Paris, being taken care of by another group of resistance and sending him. I think he was Hubert E. Trent. He was sent to Switzerland, and he made his report later. I don't remember exactly when he was shut down, but that's, I mean, you see all of these layers of people being involved. If you're lucky enough to be taken care of by a network of resistance, I mean, they're providing everything for you: identity papers, civilian clothes, food. Only it's not always easy to kind of find them when you're just lost in the countryside. So, but yeah, it's what some network of resistance in Normandy will do, and there's tens of stories like this.
Yeah.
Forging papers and IDs. You need it for the airmen that you're trying to save and evade. You need it for those who are required to work in Germany but don't want to go to Germany, the STO. You need it for also Jewish citizens and those that you're going to welcome, the Jewish refugees that you're trying to save from the German. So you got an example of a fake ID card. Fernand Panel was born in 1922, so he was required for his age to be sent in Germany for a mandatory work service in Germany. His fake identity said that he was born in 1919. Now, it's simple, but you need someone to take the picture of the guy, someone to do the paper, someone to have the stamp, the official stamp, to be able to forge this card, this ID card. And that's why mayor, administration worker will be so valuable for the resistance. You need people to work for the administration so they can steal, they can take some of the paper. One of the guys who's going to do it, and he's quite famous locally as well, is Roland Vico, where he can do it in a way more easily because he's the mayor of a little village where you get the Ardennes Abbey, Saint-Germain-la-Blanche-Herbe. Another family who's going to forge so many papers, these are the sisters of Robert Thomas. You know, the Robert Thomas who was already gathering intelligence and at the same time trying to save some airmen in Normandy, where his entire family is working to make fake papers. All of his sisters are going to be arrested in 1943. He will have to escape from Normandy for some time. All of them will survive. They will be liberated or be condemned for just a few months of prison, but it's going to be to end well, at least for this family.
And I think it's important to mention, Roman, that when you talked about Hubert, the American pilot, a couple of slides ago, if the worst thing happens and he gets recaptured by the Germans, or it's a POW camp, unless he's very, very unlucky. With the risks these families are doing, it's not just the resistant himself, but the resistant's wife, girlfriend, mother, father, children, sisters, uncles. The risks are enormous, you know. So it's hats off to what they endured. And Matthew said it last night that every French worker that is saved by a fake identity from going to Germany to work for the Germans is therefore helping the Allied war effort, because they're negatively working. They're not helping the German war effort. I know the Germans were able to get workers elsewhere, but they are crying out for workers in 1944. That's one of the reasons we know in Normandy that they're using locals to do work on the Atlantic Wall, because they're running out of workers. They're dying in their droves, unfortunately, in the underground factories in Poland or Germany. And so workers are vital for the German war industry. And every single worker you can prevent going to Germany is that little bit of effort you're making just to reduce the Germans' threat.
And that idea that, you know, all of these young men who are supposed to be sent in Germany, it's going to fuel the resistance, but it's going to make the resistance a bit even more difficult, because before this, if you're trying to not go to Germany, you have a fake paper, and then, well, if you're arrested, you're fine. But many of them cannot have fake papers, so they need to hide. All of these guys from the resistance we're talking about, they have a day job. They're working as a normal painter, fisherman, a postman in the administration, a secretary. They have a day job. They're going at their day job, and in their spare time, they work for the resistance. They don't need to hide physically. But when you start to see all of these young men arriving and who don't have fake papers, but they don't want to go to Germany, you need to hide them. You enter in clandestinity. And that's where we really start to see the birth of the Maquis, of his hiding place for the resistance. And that's some of the first Maquis that we will also have in Normandy. It's really changing a lot of things for the French resistance. So, because it's been quite some time now, let's try to continue. How are the Germans going to react to all of this? We talked about Hugo Bleicher. So he is from the German intelligence service, the Abwehr. And he's going to work really hard. He's the one, I think, he arrested Peter Churchill, one of the famous SOE agent, and a few other people. So he got his hand on this network called Jean-Marie Buckmaster. In this organigram, in the entire organization, you got two names, Kiefer and Franklin. Now, Kiefer is one of the resistance who was turned against the resistance by Bleicher. And Robert and Franklin is the alias of Robert Alestre, who is a Catholic priest who is a double agent. So he knows exactly what's going on. Well, not everything, but he got a good idea. One of the things that it's going to be very deadly, especially for one guy that, well, it's a known story around here around Bayeux and Omaha, Graham Hay, I think if I'm pronouncing him right.
Hayes,
one of the
Graham Hayes, the Aquitaine. We did a show on that, with Helen Fry. We did that last year.
Yeah. If you haven't seen this show, Operation Aquitaine, one of the British commando being arrested, not arrested, but sheltered by the mayor of Agnières-en-Bessin, close to Omaha Beach. He's taken care of by this network of resistance, who was sending him in Paris, but the one who is joining him in Paris is Raoul Kiefer. And when they're arriving in Paris, Hayes is arrested by the German and will be executed.
And worth pointing out as well, folks, that Robert Alestre, the German, is portrayed in the film A Call to Spy that came out last year about Virginia Hall, and because he's in that film there. I think they give him a different name in it, but his stories are his role. They started to break up the comic line. This was, we're coming to it in a minute in your talk, but this is the disastrous period, isn't it? Because that Bleicher and his little network just breaks, unfortunately, so many units, and they kind of come down like a stack of cards, unfortunately, don't they?
It's even crazier, because actually Hugo Bleicher is not going to dismantle this network. He wants to keep his hand off on this network and see what's going on. What's going to happen is that some of these guys, some of these resistance, are going to try to kill a local collaborator, Louis Laplanche in Trouville. They will fail. But this attempt of an assassination of a collaborator will attract the attention, not of the Abwehr, but the Gestapo. And these two kind of counterintelligence, the Gestapo on one side, the Abwehr, they don't work really well together. The Gestapo is trying to gather information about this network, and they're starting to arrest some of these guys, including some of the double agent of the Abwehr. So some of the Abwehr officials need to step in and say, no, don't arrest him because he's working for us. Well, it will become a mess. But sadly, at the end, the Jean-Marie network is just completely destroyed. All of the names in colors were either killed, executed, deported, or and came back, or died in deportation. It was brutal. And it's going to get worse from December 1943 to June 1944, what we can call the terrible month of the Norman resistance. Starting with one arrest in early December 1943, if I remember well, the German will learn about some of the communist leaders. So they're going to set up a trap in December 1943 to catch the communist leaders, and it's going to work pretty well. The members of the direction of the Communist Party in Caen arrested. The leaders of the FTP, who are the kind of paramilitary resistance of the communists, arrested. Michel Debois, Henri Neveu, that we talked about, arrested. It's so bad that the Communist Party in Paris is sending someone else in Normandy to rebuild the direction of the Communist Party and the communist resistance in Normandy, but that guy too will be arrested in 1944. It's a nightmare. And the Germans don't stop here. Well, they're going to arrest so many people because also they started to use much more the collaborators, the French collaborators, who are now giving so many information to the German. In December 1943, this is the turn of the OCM, this big, really organized network of movement of resistance in Normandy. In just a few days, so many members who were responsible for the weapon drop, from the intelligence will be arrested. Odette Duché, who is the wife of René Duché, is also arrested. Roland Vico, we don't know exactly if he was part, but he was arrested at the same moment. And so many others will be forced to go into hiding and to leave Normandy. In March 1944, another network, Zéro France, who was kind of Belgium, France network of resistance, specialized in the evasion of Allies airmen. Out of the 55 members, 31 arrested. Between March and May, this is the turn of Alliance, this big information network for the Allies. March 17, Robert Douin, this culture, this leader, the leader is arrested. Georges Tomine, the fisherman in Port-en-Bessin, and so many other people in Caen, in Saint-Lô, in Cherbourg, in Agnières-en-Bessin, Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, Ouistreham, Villers-Bocage, Trévières. If you've been to Normandy and around Caen and the landing beaches, you know all of these names. All of these people are arrested wave after wave. In the Manche, around Saint-Lô, it's the turn of another movement of local movement, Libération Nord, in Avranches and Villedieu-les-Poêles. These guys arrested. Another network in May 1944, Arc-en-Ciel. And in late May and early June, I think it was even not May, I think it was early June, what we call the Ralph de Vaucelles, the train workers. Now, on May 1st, they decided to do something big. They decided to put as much chaos as they could in the train station. They just drove train above bridges that were meant to repair them. They just wrecked so many locomotives and wagons by unfortunate accident. The problem is the French collaborators are going to get interested into them, and they're going to arrest many of these communist train workers who've been resisted for quite some time. Which means before the 6th of June, just on the eve of the landing, the central prison of both Saint-Lô and Caen are filled with tens and tens, if not hundreds, of resistance or people who were caught in all this craziness. A couple of these guys who are inside in prison are actually collaborators that infiltrated network, or we don't know exactly, but they're going to be sometime executed with the resistance as well. At the same moment. And yeah, the German reprisal, what they're doing also against resistance, execution. Before D-Day, we all know, well, a lot of people know today in Normandy about the Caen prison, where you got a large massacre of prisoners on June the 6th. Afraid of what was going on June the 6th, you had many prisoners, most of them, the guys we just talked about, who were arrested days, weeks before D-Day. They were dragged out of their cells and executed one after another. We don't even know how many of them, because we never found the bodies. 7 of them from the Arc-en-Ciel network, 9 from the Vaucelles Ralph, 16 executed from the Alliance network. I mean, it's a complete disaster. Robert Douin, Désiré Lemierre, Georges Tomine from Port-en-Bessin, all executed. All the people were executed, hostages and resistance, in another place in Caen, which do not exist anymore, the 43rd Artillery Regiment Barrack. The building doesn't exist anymore, but there's still a large memorial plaque with the name of all those executed between 1940 and 1944. To give you an idea, I found the numbers. I think it was Jean Kellien who did the job to get an idea of the numbers. In Lower Normandy, so around Caen and Saint-Lô, before D-Day, it's 6,000 people arrested, and 1,400 will be deported, 170 will be executed. After D-Day, things change dramatically. In just a few weeks, it will be 1,500 arrests, 107 will be deported only, but 554 will be executed. So the the local resistance paid, or not resistance, people who were hostages, people who just happened to be against the, communist or Jewish, or who merely resisted by attending an Allied funeral or something like this. I mean, they paid a really, really heavy price in Normandy. And before concluding everything, just to give you, I mean, we could talk about this for hours again, but what happened on and after D-Day? On and after D-Day, you got several plans that were directed from London toward the resistance. I mean, the Plan Vert is the destruction of the railroads. Plan Violet, destructions of communication. Well, I pointed to you some of the action that took place along the coast. Around Saint-Lô, nearly all airline and so many communication line being destroyed by this PTT network that we talked about. And Saint-Lô is almost completely isolated. I mean, they don't know, they don't have any communication with Caen, with Cherbourg, with Jersey. They're almost isolated. And when you know how strangely the reaction will be from the leaders, the German leaders in Saint-Lô, just very early on sending units without knowing exactly what's going on, maybe it helped to really disrupt the reaction of the German. We won't know for sure. After D-Day, it really depends where you were then leaving as a resistant because you already liberated, or you're not liberated yet, but your town was so destroyed that there's nothing else you can do. So some of them will be guiding the Allied troops through the bocage or through the ruins of Caen. Some of them will be bringing intelligence to the Allied troops who are fighting to tell them that's what the Germans are doing, etc. And then there's some maquis. I won't talk too much about the maquis because it's important, but it's not really obvious what they've done. The most important was the Maquis sur Couffe, who are, kind of between Lisieux and Rouen. They will end up with 250 people in 1944 after D-Day, but that was way too much. And, they will end up just breaking in little groups. They did a lot of action, like ambushing German, killing collaborators. The problem is, when I look at the statistic that they're told about how many Germans they killed and how many prisoners they took, and blah, 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 it sounds like a lot. I mean, more than 100 Germans killed, 100 prisoners. Well, these statistics were done just after World War II, and I'm not sure. There's no proof of anything really. It's real difficult to get an idea.
Well, there was a lot in there because you get those Belgian SAS units in early August in the area near Rouen, don't you? Because that influenced the Germans' decision to escape where they ended up escaping in the Falaise Gap. That's something I was researching last year for a future show on World War II TV. That we now know that the route the Germans chose out of Normandy was further south because of work done by the Belgian SS with the resistance and the Maquis in that area. It's particularly sort of south and west of Rouen. Yeah. So, I mean, any of these stories, as we know, it's a potential show in its own right. You know, you could do a show about just the assistance in navigating up towards the Cherbourg Peninsula. There's all the, as you say, the PTT network near Saint-Lô. But underappreciated, I think, by the English-speaking fan of the Battle of Normandy. I think that this is mostly new territory for them. So again, thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Yeah, well, there's all of this kind of Maquis, little one, nothing compared to the Vercors. Or it's not as big. The geography is not perfect, also, and there is 600,000 German around Normandy, in the Battle of Normandy. What can you do as a group of resistance? There's nothing really you can do. The Maquis de Beaucoudray will be wiped out, 11 of them being executed by the German. Maquis Saint-Clair, 5 also people being found and executed by the German. I mean, the Maquis in Normandy, Guillaume le Conquérant was a bit more interesting, and we could talk another hour about the Maquis, and I don't want to take too much time. And there was Maquis in Normandy, not really active. Well, I didn't feel it was a game changer, but what you say about Rouen and the escape route for the German in Falaise, I mean, that's really interesting.
Well, there's that. There's, as you say, there's the communications in Saint-Lô. There's the gathering of intelligence about the German Widerstandsnest and the defenses. So and there's the escape lines. When you add it all up, it's significant. You know, for the not. Although we're talking of hundreds of people being deported, for the population of Normandy, a lot was achieved by a relatively small number of people. You know, I mean, it was in military terms, it was, you know, less than a division, less than a regiment almost of people in Normandy. But they had an effect on the war effort greater than their number. I would argue. Yeah.
So yeah,
and by the way, folks, the Maquis de Beaucaudray there, we did the show, Mag did the show, the Conflict on Camera show about the two kids in Saint-Lô looking on the rubble. Go and find that show on World War II TV, because their father was part of that network, and what happened to him is covered in Mag's show there. There's always, it's getting to the point now where every show I do has some kind of connection to a show I've done in the past or a show I'm doing in the future. That's the way it's getting now, which is great. So, well, I mean, this has been absolutely amazing. You've seen the comments coming in, Roman. You've been kind of a star. The people have really loved this. This has been really, really good stuff. And I feel we could have you back on again to go to a bit of a microscope and hone in on a particular aspect of this, because as we said at the beginning, we're tackling the whole of World War II in Normandy, resistance, various groups, intelligence, escape lines. It's a lot to cover in one show. So
it is. It's but I hope for some of the audience, it bring to life some conception about the French resistance that can be very blurry. What are they really achieving? Well, we're talking about real stuff and real people. If you go to Normandy today, there is plague where only if you don't know what they did, you just see another name in the street. Désiré Lemierre in Omaha Beach, where we've been driving in next to the street, Désiré Lemierre for years, but how many people knows on Omaha Beach, that street? That's about one resistant who was executed because then he was gathering intelligence for the Allied forces. And it's everywhere over Normandy, but it's a vast subject. But I hope it cleared some ideas about
and we definitely, I think, hint, Roman, because there needs to be a book in English language about this, because 10,000 Pairs of Eyes, which came up in the sidebar earlier, it's a good book, but it must be 30, if not 40 years old now, and I'm sure there's more information come out. The archives, Archives de Limonge, Archives of Calvados. I'm sure a new book could shed a lot more light. That's a good book, but it's of its time. It's like looking back at Max Hastings compared to Peter Caddick-Adams. The time is ripe, I think, for a really good English language study of the resistance in Normandy and running through it all. And it would be brilliant. So
because the material is here in French. I mean, I talked about some of what happened. Well, some of the books I talked about, but the work of Jean Kellien. There's so many books and studies made by passionate local French people who are really going deep in interviewing and showing so many detail. But if you do not speak or read French,
well, this has come up in other shows, historiography shows. It's come up. This. British write in English for the British, the Americans write in English for the Americans, the Canadians write in English for the Canadians, and the French write for the French. And the number of books by French historians that I have translated in English I can count them on the fingers of one hand. I mean, we use them. I can read them. I read them more slowly. There's that old book about Saint-Marie de Mont, La Brèche de Saint-Marie de Mont. That was fantastic. I think I lent that to Gert a few months ago, but they're not in English, these accounts. They need everything like that needs to be brought together so that French people can get access to the British historians, and British readers can get access to the French historians. It's something that I'm very keen to kind of get going. So, well, we could talk all night. We're going to leave it at that, Roman. So I'll say goodbye to you in a second, Roman. I'm just going to say, folks, thank you for joining us this week. We've had a variety of speakers on a variety of subjects, all with that theme of resistance. Italy week starts Sunday evening. It's barely 48 hours, and it all kicks off again for the next week. So I'm looking forward to that. be some really good stories. And of course, Guillaume Marie mentions there's Colette, the now Oscar-winning film that if you haven't seen it yet, the short documentary. That's another story about France that in World War II that needs to be talked about. So there we are. That was a really good show, Roman. I should have had you on before. You were brilliant. I don't want this worry about I'm not good enough. I don't know my stuff. You're brilliant, Roman. You've got a huge new fan club thanks to tonight. So and Roman is a tour guide, so if you, he's also in the link below. He's quite active on Twitter. He runs a blog, lots of stuff about not just World War II, but the First World War, Napoleonic history, things like that. So Roman is a up and coming kind of star of the sort of second generation. Me, Colin, we're of the senior generation. Well, no, we're not. We're the middle generation. There's guys older than us, but you're the kind of next one down. So brilliant, Roman. Thank you very much. I'm gonna leave it there. People for watching, thank you. I'll see you on Sunday night for Italy week. So this is Paul Woodadge for World War II TV. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon. Check out the links below. And I will see you all again on Sunday for the beginning of Italy week. Thanks, everybody, for watching.